My name's David Stewart Grissom. I go by my middle name Stewart, which was shortened to Stu when I worked at NASA, because they just seem to have a habit of nicknaming people. I was born and raised in Shreveport, Louisiana, went to high school there at Fair Park High School, went to college at Texas A&M where I got a Bachelor of Science degree in mechanical engineering. Then I went to the University of Houston and got a master's degree in mechanical engineering, and I've been an engineer for my full career. I went into the Air Force when I graduated from college in 1963, spent 4 years at Eglin Air Force Base in the Panhandle of Florida. Very nice tour of duty. When I first joined NASA in 1967, I went into their engineering directorate. I was in a design and analysis group where we provided primarily support hardware for astronauts to use when they were up in space, either doing EVA where they needed special tools. Well, one of the things I didn't personally do, but I was involved in a group of 3 or 4 of us that did several things, one of which was to provide the urinal can for the Apollo astronauts. I guess they had trouble on the early flights of whatever they had wasn't working very well. So we came up with a, simple as it sounds anyway, a little canister with some honeycomb foam, or not foam, just aluminum cell honeycomb, so that when they did direct their urine toward that, it sucked it right in, didn't splatter back. And, it was not a big technical accomplishment, but it was just an accomplishment, again, of being able to support the astronauts in that program. The biggest thing I liked, though, about the early days was our design team, which I was a part of, designed something that was called the Mobile Equipment Transporter, or MET, that went up on Apollo 14. It was like a 2-wheeled vehicle that the crew hauled or carried. It was like a rickshaw, and they carried their instruments around on the moon that gave them a lot more space to cover on. And then the subsequent Apollo flights, when they used the lunar rover, that was built in Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama. But we, because we interfaced with the astronauts a lot, all of the equipment that was carried on that was our responsibility to get it mounted and secured so that when they ran around the moon, going whatever it was, 15 miles an hour, hitting all the bumps, and it was a pretty rough atmosphere for that stuff to survive. Particularly, I think the astronauts were having a little too much fun with that buggy, the way they were driving it. So anyway, we mounted a lot of equipment on there for them, and so that was really exciting. Again, anytime you work on a project where you can see a guy on the moon, or a woman, but these were strictly men at the time, using stuff that you were involved in, was pretty exciting. And that was the last thing I remember. Shortly after that is when I went to the shuttle program office. My biggest job in that shuttle, the one I remember the most, was there was this particular mission where Hughes Aircraft launched 2 satellites out of the shuttle payload bay, and both of them failed. Whatever caused one to fail caused the other to fail, and that was a big loss of money. So Hughes was very interested in retrieving them, and so NASA decided to take on the job of retrieving them, and that was my first assignment in the shuttle program office. That's when there was a thing called the Manned Maneuvering Unit, which is a backpack that the astronauts had been in the early shuttle flights to wear. And so we used those for an astronaut to fly out, and he had a device on him, and they would literally just fly out with their MMU and then just drive into the tail cone of the satellites, the nozzle of their engine nozzles is what I'm trying to say. And so it was a very successful flight, but I probably have never been more nervous than that. And so they retrieved them both and brought them back safely. And Hughes and that was, I think, probably the first space mission that a contractor ever paid NASA money, because they paid us to retrieve those 2 satellites. So that was very exciting. So Then in 1990, when they set up the Shuttle Mir program office, I was transferred to go into that as a representative for the program office, and it was several trips to Russia. The first one was very interesting, and the rest of them were just, I hated to go. Once you've been there, once, you don't want to go back, because it's just a terrible society to be in the middle of. And I remember the first time I went in 1990. We hadn't quite got that friendly with the Russians yet, and so once we came across Russian airspace, they wouldn't let us use any cameras, and they were being very strict about security. And when we landed, they had all these soldiers around us with machine guns, just making sure we were going to do the right things. But on the second and subsequent trips, it was just like any other trip. I mean, it was no big deal. Nobody cared about us. We just went into the airport, and checked our luggage, or got our luggage, and it was a pretty routine visit.